Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sueños to Success. This is a podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of resilience, transformation, and personal success. Today, I have the honor of speaking with an extraordinary changemaker in education, Dr. Robin Avelar LaSalle. Dr. Avelar LaSalle is the founder and president of Orenda Education, an organization transforming school systems to ensure that historically underserved students, Black, Brown, immigrant, and low income youth, can thrive. Her own journey from growing up with limited resources to earning a PhD from Stanford University is a powerful story of possibility and purpose. Dr. Avelar LaSalle, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rios. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here with you.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's an incredible journey you've had. I'm honored that you're here. You run a very impactful organization that's in multiple school districts and supporting these organizations of education to think differently about how we treat kids, about how we treat their families, and about how we work with our staff and teachers to make sure we create all these ecosystems of support, ecosystems of cariño for everyone. And I want to talk a little bit about how you got there because you're such an incredible big picture systems change person. Along the way in your journey, being educated um, from elementary school all the way to your Stanford PhD, where was it in that journey that you decided, like, you know what, I want to dedicate my purpose to helping improve the way that children are educated who come from low income and
Mhm.
marginalized backgrounds.
I think it's sort of it's a phase-in sort of process. So I have to confess that I'm a bossy little girl, and I was such at 3 years old. So I'm told, and I think I have real memories, but it could be just family stories. That at 3 years old, I would hold escuelita outside of my court. We had these bungalows, these courts that we lived in, and I'd
Like an
amass.
apartment complex?
Um, in Echo Park, downtown LA, where I grew up, they have these structures where you go down a path, and then on either side, there's these little flat top bungalows they call courts. So we felt very proud that we weren't in apartment buildings, but because we didn't share walls with anybody, but there's a little
Oh,
bit of space between each of
like little
these.
cottages.
Yes, okay. Maybe in another neighborhood, they'd be cottages. They're definitely courts. But I would get all the kids together and teach them how to count with palitos, with little sticks. And we lived immediately across the street from our elementary school, like literally across the street, feet away. And the school did this genius thing, which was whenever they would obsolete materials, they would just leave them out on the front of the school grounds on a table. And those could be books, they could be office supplies, pencils. We were all over that stuff. So I was fascinated by the office forms with the little carbon paper in the middle and anything that looked schoolish, I was fascinated by. And so I would just make all the kids in the area, in the courts, sit there and listen to me teach them stuff. I don't know how much I knew to teach, but in my head anyway, I was holding school and they were coming. And I think that kind of happened because growing up, my father was a waiter and bartender my whole life. I was so proud that he would go to work in a white shirt and a tie and a vest. He worked in all of the big downtown LA hotels,
Mm.
the Biltmore, the Hilton, the Alexandria
Mm.
of historical note, and Olvera Street. But that's what he did for a job. But we always knew my father was a teacher in Mexico.
Mm.
And so at 19, he started teaching. Their system's different. And after a few years of getting paid in chickens and goats and not cash money, which is what he needed to send back to his town where his father, mother, and siblings were, um, he came to the United States. And not speaking English and all that, he was a waiter and bartender. But I knew he was a teacher. So in my head, it was about teaching. Well, it always was. So
What was your so you're this little 3-year-old girl, little toddler, you're you have 2 sources of influence, it seems like the school that's leaving supplies out, and then your father that you knew was a teacher. What was that relationship like with your father in terms of him being a teacher? Was he sort of giving you messages about education?
Mhm. You know, uh, I of course, we're scholars, so we've read all the research about how it's supposed to happen and how those messages are transmitted, but you're a little kid, you don't really realize what's going on. I think what I knew was that my father was a teacher, regardless of what he was doing for a living. I had experiences like, I think I was in the 4th grade, and I was always my mission was to be the perfect kid, and that's pathological for what's going on in my family. So, I was the perfect one, and, being an amazing student was my way to get pride transmitted to my family. So I was that, and I remember in the 4th grade, I believe I was given an award. The principal called me into the office and said, because I'm such a good student, I was gonna get an award. Oh, 5th grade. And I was going to be able to leave my classroom about 20 minutes early every day from before lunch, and I was going to get to serve lunch on the lunch line with the cafeteria ladies. They were all ladies then, and he handed me a hairnet. And then I would get extra bread, or LA Unified Lunches are famous for their homemade baked goods. So I was so excited. So I remember walking across the street after school and going to my parents and telling my dad, Daddy, like, "Oh, here's another thing I'm going to get to make them feel so proud about." And I opened my hand and I showed him the hairnet. And I really, really vividly remember him looking and saying, "Take that hairnet, walk across the street and give it back to them and tell them thank you. But if they want to honor you for being a good student, then you're very happy to tutor other children, to work in the library, to help translate in the office. But I did not come through my journey, through dubious circumstances to get here, to have a better life so that you could serve food, which is what I do for a living. There's no shame in it. I do it because I have to, but I do it so that you won't have to."
Wow, I got goosebumps. I mean, that's making me teary-eyed.
It was really,
Wow.
confusing in that cognitive dissonance, like, "Whoa, whoa." One of the first times where I realized the values at home and the values at school don't match.
Yeah. And it's not like they were trying to in their head saying, "We're gonna train her to be a food server,"
Mm,
but it's more of him affirming that the reason that we come to this country, the reason that we sacrifice, the reason that I work so hard is to make sure that you elevate beyond what I could possibly do in this country.
it's opportunity, and I think he was just, um so to me, I what I took away from that was, "Ooh, my family's a little bit smarter than school about some things." So I don't need to automatically defer my thoughts and my beliefs and my values to school, which I thought before, was the supreme standard of all things righteous and right. But maybe we know things that other people don't know. It was a cool idea. It just made me realize my dad was the smartest person on earth.
And so that leads you into this journey where you kinda always know your direction, right? Either he provided direction
Yeah.
and you knew your direction, so you're playing escuelita, you're bullying kids into learning from
Hey,
you.
hey, hey. Yes.
You're you're and at what point in your education trajectory well, let me yeah. Were you bilingual at home?
Ye Good
Spanish?
question. So, our first language was Spanish. I have one sister. And, when we got to kindergarten, I started at 4 and a half. The teacher told my parents that they were doing me a disservice because I went to kindergarten not speaking English.
Oh.
And so we switched over to English. By then, my father spoke some English with an accent, but a brilliant person. So grammar, perfect, just pronunciation. And an odd thing about me is my mom is not Mexican. My mom is white. She's actually Italian on one side, Russian on the other, but met my father in New York City. Another long story with many skeletons, but in those closets. But she was completely fluent in Spanish, and she said she was Chicana by choice. So the
Mm.
whole neighborhood thought she was Mexican. In fact, my sister and I did not realize we were not completely 100% Mexican
'Cause the whole
until
neighborhood was
at
Mexican?
Mexican. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
One more Mexican than the next. It's, but my grandmother came from New York, and she was after she retired, and she was this buxom, blue-eyed woman with one of those TV New York accents, like she'd say coffee, and my sister and I looked at my mom, I remember, and said, like, "Mommy, did you forget to tell us something?" Or it was like upper elementary school before we realized completely. In fact, when we were little, my mom would say, "Niñas, vengan a comer, setze havek manja." And so, "Come and eat." And
Manja.
what we thought that's a mix of English,
Russian.
Spanish, German, and Yiddish.
Yiddish.
I'm
Wow.
Russian and Yiddish and, setze
Manja,
havek manja is Italian.
Italian, yeah.
So my sister and I, we talk about it now. We'd say we just thought there was English and Spanish. So if it wasn't in English, it must have all been Spanish. We didn't realize there was other stuff mixed in there. Um, and so then we spoke Spanish as our first language, our only language, and then switched over. Interestingly, by about the third grade, once we switched over to English, I remember being called to the office at school to help translate for a mom. And the principal said, "This is a brand new mom, came from Mexico. Please tell her that she needs to leave, 45 cents for her child's lunch." And so I said in Spanish to her, the principal says you need to leave money for lunch. Le tiene que dejar dinero para que coma aquí en la escuela. And she goes, "Okay, sí, está bien, pero ¿cuánto? How much?" And I looked at the principal very confidently and I said, "She wants to know how much." And then he repeated, "I told you, it's 45 cents." And then I looked at her and I realized I don't know numbers in English
Oh,
because
wow.
language is contextual. I learned numbers at school and everything else since at home is in Spanish. So I repeated again. He says, "You need to bring enough money for lunch." Every which way to say, and then I burst into tears
Mm.
because I realized I had lost the ability to communicate fluently in my language.
That
That was
is
the first time.
powerful. What grade was this? 3rd?
Third grade.
That is powerful. Being a translator for the family, whether it's language or other ways,
Mhm.
cultural, it's a big burden on little children. I had an experience where we were with my mom and she wanted to go downtown and we're at the bus stop.
Mhm.
And she said to me, uh, cuando venga el bus, le dices que si va para el centro. When the bus shows up, um, ask him if he goes downtown. But I didn't know how to translate to downtown. It's a big difference, centro and downtown.
Mhm.
So the bus driver pulls up, and back then you got the big buses blowing like big puffs of black smoke from the side. It's before all the emissions control stuff. So it's just like shows up, blowing all this black smoke, opens the door, and I'm standing there looking up, and I know I got this. I know I can translate. So I'm like, excuse me, Mister, do you go to the center?
Yep.
And then he looks at me and he goes, I don't go to no center. Get out of my bus. And he shuts the door in my face and takes off. And as he takes off, the black smoke kind of just, floats away. And I see on the back, it says
Mhm.
downtown. And I look at my mom and we got in big trouble, of course. And in that moment, though, I realized that it was gonna be a really difficult time for me trying to really be a translator for my family. It's such a big it's an honor, but a lot of times we don't talk about how that could also take a toll on young people.
Oh, it messes with you, and there's so much concern for newcomers, English learners. My heartache right now is largely for first generation, depending on how you count. First generation kids who are connected to their culture, their community, their family, but are from here, raised here. Whether you're born here or not's irrelevant, but where if you go to school here, you're of here. And how you go home and eh, people will say, "Oh, they're long-term English learner kids because they haven't reclassified. They haven't met the criteria to be an English-only student." But they are English dominant, like I was, like I am to this day still. I spent every opportunity from that day forward, well, actually, from high school on, when was the first time when you could actually study Spanish, trying to regain my language. And I think a lot of people in that represent my demographic will say that we have this real secret insecurity
Mm,
that we know we're posers. Because I can speak to you in Spanish right now all day long, and I can go and I can present and all that. And deep inside, I know I'm saying things a way that I'm not thinking that because I don't know the word for that,
mm,
or I can't conjugate the past pluperfect the way I could in English into Spanish. The way I'm feeling the communication is not going to come out exact. You go home and your parents speak to you in Spanish and you answer back in English. And anybody who knows the kind of world I'm talking about, that's what we do.
yeah.
We understand everything. Well, so over here, we're not. It reminds me of that scene in the movie Selena
Mhm.
where Jennifer Lopez or Selena is telling her dad, um, "We're not Mexican enough for the Mexicans. We're not American enough for the American. It's a good thing we eat all those beans and tortillas, so we have the strength to handle all of this." It
Yes,
messes with your confidence
yes,
constantly.
I agree with that. Yeah, especially in halls of power like Stanford, Berkeley, the
Mm,
academy, where but in both cases, so I show up learning big words in English, as
mhm,
an academic, PhD from Berkeley, blah blah blah, and then it was a interesting thing that happened a few years ago where these incredible intellectuals, professors from Latin America show up, Mexico, um, Central America, Peru, and they show up, and we have an academic conference, and all of them are presenting in Spanish. Yo hablo español bien, pero lo hablo mucho. So, like, I speak it well, but I chop it up. And so the minute it was my turn to present, even though I was talking to them in Spanish, I couldn't say the big words in Spanish, so I had to flip to
mhm,
my intellectual, English,
mhm,
identity. And in that moment, like you said, that insecurity kicked in, like, wow, the fact that I grew up in a time where it wasn't cool
mhm,
to speak Spanish, and not only that, there was laws against speaking Spanish, right? That's who they
mhm.
targeted in California in the 1990s, and it lasted into very recently where there's a great movement now for multilingualism,
Yeah,
but for, I think, a few generations, it had a big impact.
it did. You know what kind of helped me a lot. Um, is you do know, but I hope, and it's part of my mission in life for the whole world to know, Mr. Sal Castro.
Oh, yeah.
So Mr. Sal Castro was the teacher who is credited with um, whether it's inciting, instigating, or inspiring, depends on who's talking about it. The blowouts or the high school walkouts in 1968, all the East Side high schools walked out fighting for educational equity, and he was a teacher at Lincoln High School at the time. He was arrested and indicted, and he was set to go away for 60 years for conspiracy to overthrow the government or some craziness. In the end, and they took away his credential and his job. In the end, it was all reinstated, but his punishment was he had to go to Belmont High School, go Sentinels. That's my high school.
Mm.
And so um,
Wait,
I
why is that a punishment to go to your high school?
because he had to get away from the high school where he was.
Oh,
So it's from one East Side high school to another
okay.
downtown LA high school. So it's like from the Guatemala Guatepeor. You go from one, urban tough high school to another urban tough high school somewhere completely out of what they thought was his network. And he was not permitted to sponsor any student clubs. He was not permitted to be the leader of any student events. In fact, he was banned for a long time from even attending the extracurricular
Yeah.
activities
And,
because,
and just for the audience, um, there's books written
oh,
about this teacher. He's a real historical icon in the Chicano
that's right.
movement and in the story of Mexican Americans, really in the United States.
He's like Cesar Chavez, but in education.
Yes.
He's comparable, and they were friends. So I had the amazing benefit of having him as my junior US history teacher. So now, this person is my history teacher. They put him, by the way, on the fourth floor of a building way down the hall with no other classrooms open around him, across from the restrooms that have no doors, just like where the lights are broken. Just it was punishment. Um, but when we walked down the long dark corridor to get to his classroom, he had a reel to reel player. For the young folks watching, Google it. But it's a tape player, and he would play Santana, and so I always say like the Chicano national anthem is Oye Como Va, because that would be playing as we're coming down the hallway, and that's what greeted us in our US history class. And then he would start and he'd say, okay, like Robin Avelar. And my name, I grew up knowing it as Avelar in school. So
Mm.
Avelar, it was very odd for me. I almost wanted to correct him. I knew better, but he intentionally would call us that way. He called one girl Emiliana Zapata. Her name was Millie. No, he would call her Emiliana Chancla, and her name was Millie Zapata. Like everybody's names, he would, Mexicanify, like to make it okay. And all of us there at that time were like me. We were from here.
Mm.
Where regardless of where we were born, we went to school here from the time we were little. And all of us were feeling this kind of poser sort of thing, like not exactly Mexican enough, but our homes are, but we can speak Spanish, but we kind of don't. And so he would make us, like in our US history class, one of the exam questions was, what's the name of the city that you live in? Oh, it's Los Angeles. No, 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 mijito. We had to write, it's Nuestra Señora la Reina de los Ángeles de Porciúncula, with the accent on the uncula. Like,
Oh.
and then he would tell us, okay, see all the street names here? Pico, Sepulveda. Go, that's Pico. He was the first governor of California, and he was Mexican. And that's Sepulveda. He was the first blah, blah, blah. And so everything around us all of a sudden, like we belonged here. We were not posing anymore.
Mm.
I kind of almost felt sorry for everybody else who thought this was their place and it's really our place. And I studied the heck out of Spanish. Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, Spanish 4. I went to Cal State LA, Spanish 5, Spanish 6, Spanish 7, became a bilingual teacher, took all the exams, did, everything to try and reclaim. And I think I can fake it quite well right now. I could get away with it. But deep in my heart, when I speak to my cousins from Aguascalientes, I'm still the pocha.
Mm.
And, I'm insecure
Yeah.
about that, like so many of our kids.
Yeah.
I remember somebody saying to a friend of mine in high school, you shouldn't want to take Spanish. You already speak Spanish. Take French. And I was thinking, Well, that's like saying you shouldn't take English in high school because you speak English. Like, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, there is.
So,
That's such a powerful identity that you mentioned that word pocha, pocho. The meaning of it is really the phrase that gets used on those of us that are this side of the border,
mhm,
are either raised here or born here. And when you go to Mexico, people don't see you as Mexican. They see
mhm,
you as different. They really do see you as American, and but they know you're kind of Mexican, so they create this word pocho pocha, like
yeah.
this is who you are, and we know you don't speak good Spanish, and we know you have different customs, and we kind of accept you. We also know don't try to say you're Mexican to us
Mm-mm.
because we'll correct you. And then when we're here, even to this day, right? I'm accomplished all these things. I sit on a plane next to uh, you know, someone, and she says, this is just a few months ago, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a professor, University of California, Santa Barbara. Oh, great. What do you work on? And say I work finding solutions for young people that are not doing well in our society, particularly those from the inner city. Oh, wonderful. And where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from Oakland, California. No, really, where are you from? And, right away, she wants to know
Yeah,
what country I'm from.
that's right.
And of course, I'm proud of being of Mexican origin. But the fact that the color of our skin or the way our voice might sound to other people makes us an other and not an American is still a reality that, especially in our times today, many of our children face. And I
Mhm.
think that school systems really the same way that your teacher, Mr. Sal Castro, right, empowered you to feel that it's okay
Mhm.
to be where you come from and to be named what you're named, that is an important intervention because then that gives our kids an opportunity to feel like even though I've been done wrong by other people, told you don't belong here or whatever, I know that there's people here that value who I am and where I come from.
Oh, oh, wow, absolutely. I'll tell you a recent story. And I beat you by like 20 years. In age and years doing this. And just a few years ago, I went to Northern California because somebody wanted to connect me with a very high tech person who was looking to invest in the kind of work that we do to offset the costs for schools and districts who are interested in overturning historical patterns of under success, et cetera, et cetera. And so he came in and said, well, so what is your name? And I said, my name is Robin Avelar LaSalle. And he said, what? Just very, very unusual. And I said, what's your name? And it was something like Bob, something like that. Oh, nice to meet you, Bob. And he said, and where are you from? And I said, oh, and I laughed to myself because that question's loaded from where I come from, but where are you from? So I just laughed to myself and said, I'm from LA. And he goes, from where? And I go, LA. And he goes, what did you say? And I said, Los Angeles. He said, oh, Los Angeles.
Mm.
The way that he said it. So something, and I speaks hardcore Echo Parkian. I don't deny it. You can take the girl out of the neighborhood, but then, I can turn it on and off or dial it up and down as I need to, but that's who I am. So, and then he said, and your name of your organization? And I said, Orenda Education. He said, Orenda, what does that mean? And I said, well, it's a word from the Iroquois language, and it means the energy force inherent in every human being that gives us the power to change the world and to change ourselves.
Wow.
The word is Orenda. And he goes, that's not even in English. He goes, first thing we got to do is change your name. I said, oh, because it's not in English? Then you better start with LA.
Mm.
And how about California?
Mm.
And by the way, we're meeting in Los Altos. And then I got up and walked away and I thought, what a jerk. But those are the power people. Mr. Castro, this is what got the belly in the fire in my belly. Mr. Castro we had us do our first research report in the junior year, ever. Never, ever, ever asked to do a research report. And so he had a table that he put outside the classroom in the dark hall, and he would call us out one on one. He called it office hours. So he was socializing us to college, which I didn't realize at the
You
time.
didn't even know.
Mm-mm. And so he sat across and then he said, okay, you're going to do a research paper. Here's the list of topics that you can pick from. And you picked the blowouts of 1968. This is Mr. Castro. You have to know him. Anyone who knows him will laugh. Like, you get to pick, but I just told you what you picked. So I said, okay. And then he gave me the book by Rudy Acuna. And he said, and here, look it up here. So, okay, I go back in the class, I look in this book, and then I look up the blowouts and I see the name of someone that has the same name as my teacher, Mr. Sal Castro. And so I said, my gosh, what a coincidence that the person who led it took me, how could I not even know? Nobody knew who he really was.
Wow.
And when I did the report and realized what was going on, and the next year was 1978, that's my year, and the walkouts happened 10 years prior. A group of friends and I decided we need to do a 10-year anniversary of the walkouts because we still have the lights broken in the hallway and the restrooms with no doors, and we're still being funneled into this and not that, and etc. And so we organized the walkouts, a group of us. Somebody snitched, is what they did. And so when we said walkouts, walkouts, and we all walked out at a certain time, there were snipers on the roof in
Whoa.
the buildings on the quad, pointed down. And I'm embarrassed, very embarrassed, that I looked up and put my tail between my legs, and then we all went right back to class. And right after lunch, my class was with Mr. Castro. I had him for another class. And I went up to him and I said, Mr. Castro, he was loosely aware of what we were doing. He wasn't instigating, but he educated us. So I said, Mr. Castro, I'm so sorry. I'm so ashamed that we didn't have the strength of the students 10 years ago. Like, we couldn't do it. We were too scared. They got their heads beat in. They had, water hoses, pressure hoses shot at them. What didn't they endure? Um, and we couldn't. And then he grabbed me. He goes, Mija, they walked out 10 years ago so that you don't have to. They walked out so you could walk in. So you graduate,
Oh,
you go to college,
wow.
get all the education that you can, get a PhD. I don't know what the heck that was.
Hmm.
And then you come back and you fight this fight from the inside out, not from the outside. And those days are gone.
That's powerful. They walked out so you could
Mr.
walk in.
Castro.
That is beautiful. That's a tearjerker right there. Wow.
May he rest in peace.
So that's one of the moments where you're like, okay, I've been playing La Escuelita. I've been bullying kids into learning from me. I've been learning from my dad that I do need to seek out a space where I am of a higher education. And now this teacher tells me your battle is to go into the system and change it from within. And so go get yourself a higher education. to do
Whatever
that.
that means. I'll tell you, Cal State, which I only applied to Cal State LA because I knew I was going to be a teacher. They are the teaching college, and there's 3 buses between Echo Park and Cal State LA. We didn't have a car. So thankfully, I was accepted. Uh, but even though your head is on right and you're the great student, and I had scholarships like crazy and everything, I remember one day I was studying, and I learned to study with the radio blasting because lots of stuff going on at the house loud. And so I heard screaming, and there was fighting and all that. And so I remember coming out of the room and had my books in my hand, and I never ever would disrespect my parents, my family, never, never, the opposite. But I'm in college now, and so I have a certain, I don't know, a certain confidence and a little bit of arrogance. Like, maybe I'm a little bit smarter and know more worldly now than my home. And so I had the courage to go out and say, enough.
Mm.
And I slammed the books down on the floor with great bravado. I remember it's very dramatic in my head anyway. And I said, how am I supposed to study with this going on already? That's the end. I'm not going to forget it. Then I don't need to go to school. And why am I even worrying about it? So then my father stood up And he walked right up to me and he said, "And why is it that you're going to school?"
Mm.
Just shocked me. Didn't yell at me, didn't he would never, didn't get defensive. He just said, "And why is it that you're going to college?" "Oh, to be a teacher." "And why are you going to be a teacher?" "Because all the kids, they need to be educated. They need to have a better life. They need to." And he goes, "Uh-huh. And that's your purpose?" "Mhm, yeah, that's okay. Then I don't care if we have an earthquake at this moment and the house falls on top of us. You pick up your books and you go back to the room and you continue to study."
Mm.
And I went like, uh, uh, when I bent over, I grabbed my books and I went back to the room and I just turned the radio louder. And so, like that, those things, yeah. I always think just when you think, I know we all have students that were like, oh, they're set, they're fine. And then something happens and you think, how did that happen? They were right on the right track. Well, stuff happens. And it's that split second that you could fall off the rails,
Mhm.
or not.
And we come from a culture of resilience and a culture of humility. And sometimes, what happens is that some of our kids, maybe they're growing up low income, maybe parents can't be there. Lots of adversities, and they go into school systems where there's a misconception. Oh, you're a victim. I'm going to treat you like
Mhm.
a victim. Pobrecito, pobrecita, you poor thing. Um, and it's okay. You don't have to do all of the work. It's okay. You don't have to learn college level because you're just surviving. And when we do that, it's a disservice because what we need to do is tap into the resilience and humility that's already built into the culture, which is y'all know how to survive no matter what. So when you come into my classroom, I'm gonna give you difficult material, and I know you're gonna survive it because if you're able to survive all of that going on over there, I know you could survive some academic content. And it's not until our systems have the high level of support emotionally and a high level of academic expectations together. It's not until that happens that really all children, no matter their income or culture or language, um, will start to thrive at big levels. And we worry about like why isn't it that you know our kids aren't doing well? Why is it that we're failing them so much? Why is it? And maybe it begins with our logic and our assumptions about them. Well, they're victims. They're coming from places that just give them a break. And instead, it's more of let's take good care of them. Let's raise the floor, but also let's raise the bar. You do both at the same time. Yeah.
That's so true. I was very, very, heartbroken during the pandemic, um, because first, a lot of the things that I know happen in homes were more publicly visible because everything was on Zoom and you could see what's going on in the back of the camera and so all of a sudden, um, some stereotypes were confirmed and some things people got impressions that maybe they thought they knew before, but now they were sure they knew. And then because of that, when school opened again, all the talk was, and I'm on the outs with a lot of people in our work on this point, admittedly so, that because of all the trauma that was endured during COVID, that we need to be very careful. And social emotional learning became very important, and trauma informed practices. Okay, those are all, to me, it's like bread and water. Of course. But of course, that's just assumed, like you're breathing, like there's air in the room. That just has to be. But to say, poor, poor people because they had, more people die in their communities than others, because they had people get sick, because people were arrested and sent to college. because of things that we're seeing now. No, you know what? No, my my scholarship took me to a lit review during that time, and I looked up what is the best solution? What is the best response for children who have experienced extreme trauma worldwide on the planet? Famine, civil war, genocide, hurricanes, floods. And you know what I found?
Mm,
A structured school with routine that they've always been accustomed to, with the same people they've always known, with the expectations that challenge your mind and your soul to rise beyond your current situation. That's the best medicine for trauma.
mm, yeah. No, I mean, those of us that kind of came up in those experiences of trauma, even for guests that been on this show, myself, it was really that structure, that person that was familial that said, "Hey, I believe in you. You got this. Go do it." And those systems of support that said, "Hey, that's fine that you've been through a lot. We respect that, but you still gotta finish your English assignment and you still gotta learn algebra because algebra is the number one killer. If you don't master algebra,
Yes.
you're gonna flunk high school, right?" And so, like, having people stand up to me and say that rather than, "Oh, you've been through so much, and I don't know how you're gonna
Mhm.
graduate high school, but I'm here to support you." That was a disservice, and so finding out ways to support people that are struggling by, again, letting them know that you have a higher expectation of them, and so it's beautiful to hear about your scholarship. I wanna hear a little bit of your Stanford journey, but before we go there, your dad was very humble, your
Mhm.
teacher was very humble,
Mhm.
you're a very humble person. What do you what do you make of humility in terms of us as a cultural strength that helps us succeed
Mhm.
in America,
Wow. What's the nature of God? That's a
right?
good question. I think it's a double-edged sword.
Mm,
So I think, first of all, we can't change who we are. We come this way, At least that's been my experience. And so this is our comfort place, but it allows us to play in the playgrounds of more entitled and privileged people because we're not a threat when we present that way.
mm,
So it reinforces the way we are. We're acceptable. The double-edged sword is if you happen not to come that way, if you happen to be somebody who looks like us, and you happen to come up present in a more entitled, privileged, or um, self-assured, um, forthright sort of way, which would be very normal and acceptable in other arenas. Um, Not only do you get it from the power structure, but our community doesn't like it either. So
mhm,
I feel for as I have lived on the planet longer, I tell you way more shades of gray. Where early on I would say, "Oh no, we just need to be humble and all that." I realize that people come in all varieties and all personality types, and I hope that as time goes on, we make room in our community for all kinds of personalities. Um, because we don't right now.
I hear you. Yeah, it's almost like humility has to be the default. And in Spanish, we say ambicioso o ambiciosa. Él es ambicioso. And that doesn't mean like ambitious like in
Mhm.
English. In English, you say, hey, that person's ambitious. Oh, wow, they want to succeed. They want to do good things in life. They want to finish school. They want to get a good job, build a business. They're ambitious. But in Spanish, ambicioso sounds more like you're a little bit greedy. You're a little bit out of
Mhm.
place. You're a little bit like you don't know how to be humble. And I appreciate that perspective that it's okay to be humble and it's also okay to be ambitious, especially if we're representing the interests of our families and communities.
Yeah, I just mm, wonder sometimes, I can be in a room with somebody next to me and observe their negotiation of an issue and think, "I would never talk like that." And then see how much further they get than I get and think, "I need to step out of my comfort zone and say, 'Darn it, you know what?'" But, we're not generally comfortable like that. Yeah, in group or out group.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah, so it's a cultural strength. It allows us to sort of um, be in conviviality because you got to be humble in order to be part of a familial world, right? Because otherwise, it's like I'm better than everyone. I don't need you all. But it's more
mhm.
like actually we are all interdependent, and so I'm gonna, regardless of my titles, when I go back to Oakland, I'm with my family. I'm just Victor, that used to get in trouble and people had to bail me out and my uncle had to, you know, he has got 6 kids. My uncle Ruben, he's got 6 kids and then, he recycles for a living, so he doesn't make a lot of money. But at the time, his wife, Antonia, and him would always have a 7th plate of food on the table for me because I was hungry and my mom wasn't around. And for me to show up and be like, "Oh, look at me now," when they were the ones that were feeding me when I was
Yeah.
hungry,
Mm.
I gotta know how to humble myself going into those spaces. But then also I gotta know how to operate in this world where sometimes we have to be assertive and we have to recognize that some people will take advantage of our humility in this world. Yeah.
And that happens. That's funny. I remember I was at Stanford, and I would come back almost every month or more frequently. I might have been up there, but we have every birthday you have to be here for, every holiday you have to be here for, every baby shower you have to be here for, etc. And I came back for a baby shower, and my tia was at a table with the other, senior matriarchs. There are no men. Uh, Men are a rare commodity in my family. And, so my tia, "So, mija, ven pa' acá." So I go over there and here's my family name, they called me, and, um, she's, "What are you doing now, mija?" And so I said, "Oh, I don't know that they know what Stanford is. I don't know that they know." But I just said, "Tia, I'm a student." I had already been a teacher, a coordinator. I was getting my doctorate at Stanford, but I'm a student. I'm going to school still. I'm going to school. I knew she knew I had been a teacher. I was a teacher. And so she looks to everybody and before they said anything, she stopped them and she said, "It's okay, mija. You keep studying. One day you're going to graduate. I
Mm,
believe you."
mm.
And I wanted to say, "No, no, no, wait, wait. I already have a master's. But it was like, "Okay, tia, thank you." Like that. You have moments where they let me get off my high horse if I was ever on one because it doesn't matter here at all.
Yeah, it's a great equalizer to come from
Yeah.
a culture of humility. Well, let's talk a little bit about the research. 'Cause I want to hear more too about that journey at Stanford and research from the National Institutes of Health shows that
Mhm.
36% of second generation Latino young people complete college more than their third generation peers. So there's like you were talking about that earlier, right? You were talking about
Mhm.
sometimes we're focused on the language learners, but it's that second, third, and later generations that get hit hard because there's so many theories behind it. One theory is that the longer as a people we are in this country, the more impacts of historical, racism and other forms of discrimination hit our
Mhm.
communities, and then it's hard to bounce back from that. There's so many other theories about it, but I wonder what your take is in sort of being in a institution like Stanford, getting your degree there, representing a specific
Mhm.
community, and kind of the way you were presenting, right, as coming from that community. Oh, what was that journey like?
Well, it was very it was a shock. Shock, 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 shock. The only reason why I went to Stanford was because someone at Cal State LA, one of my English teachers, wrote on my paper, gave me an A. Of course, National Dean's List every quarter. I tell you, one thing, the world baffles me. I'm not good at life, but school, that's my jam. I'm good at school. And she wrote, come see me. You should go to graduate school. So I went to correct her, to explain to her I was getting my master's. I was in graduate school. And she said, "Oh, no, girl." And she sat me down and she explained public, private, doctorate, PhD, master's,
Wait,
EDD.
wait. So you're getting a master's at Cal State, and you don't know about the research PhD world?
Not at all.
Wow.
Nothing. Nothing. No idea. I knew my professors were Dr. Hernandez and Dr. This. I didn't even question it. I had no idea. My worldview is very small. And um, so she explained, she broke it down. I remember on the chalkboard, she drew the lines and the squares, and you're here, and this is here, and these are all the options, and you need to go get a doctorate. And my first thought was like, I don't want to be a doctor, like medical doctor. I didn't connect anything. Now that I want to be embarrassed telling you this, but I'm not. It's just what it was. And then she said, no, and there's an EDD and there's a PhD, and you need to get the PhD. And she explained that a doctorate in education, they're both doctors, I'll call you doctor, but very few girls, women that look like you have a PhD. And that's a research standard. It's the higher bar in the way it's viewed. I've come to now understand that's not necessarily the case. But, and you can go to this school, that school, or Harvard, Princeton, or Stanford. Like, you need to go to one of those name brand schools because somebody that looks like you and that sounds like you, she noted my Echo Parkian, thing, needs to be beyond question if you're going to have the influence that I had written about in my paper. And so I applied to UCLA and to Stanford, and UCLA lost my paperwork many, many times over. Just I was kind of a number. No aspersions against UCLA today, but that was my lived experience. And I didn't send the application to Stanford, and then I was uh, engaged at the time. My husband was in the Navy. My fiance was in the Navy, and when he showed up after 6 months, he said, "Hey, what's up with that application?" At the time, he didn't have a degree. And I said, "Oh, like, I didn't send it." So that night, he went to the post office and he sent it at midnight, and it was a week after the deadline, and it was sent anyway. And then a week later, I got a call from them saying, "Oh, we received your application, and the professor wants to fly down and meet you." And so then I called UCLA to tell them, "Oh, I think I was accepted to Stanford, so thanks anyway." And they said, "Just a minute," put me on hold, and then came back and said, "Oh, we accepted you too." So, just the bureaucracy. But you see how we go through things, and we just, like, I'm not equipped for any of this. I don't know what it means. I don't even know to think between the lines or to infer anything. And then when it came down to it, Stanford offered me a full ride. Full ride, UCLA didn't, partial. So I would still be teaching, and it would take me 8 years to finish at UCLA, and at Stanford, it was 4 years. I was not allowed to work at all, full ride plus a living stipend. And they had a program in biliteracy, bilingual education, cross-lingual transfer of learning in Stanford-esque terms. And so my husband, who was in the Navy and had
Transfer of learning.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
And so my husband, who had been in the Navy and traveled the world a little bit, New Yorican, but had was accustomed to moving places. I certainly was not. He said, "Yeah, let's go, pack up." So I would have never, ever, ever gone.
So you moved to Palo Alto?
So no, so we went to Palo Alto, and I'm going to tell you the true story is we go to campus. My campus experience was Cal State LA. I'd not been on any other college campus ever in my life. And that's a farm. They call it a farm for a reason. It's a farm. There's land everywhere. It's humongous. I'm gonna get lost. I don't. And then we went to the married student housing, which were apartments. And remember, I have this aversion to apartments. To me, it's not safe to open up your door and be in a hallway. I lived in courts, so you have to open up your door and be outside. It's a thing. And so I couldn't do that. And then we went to the market that they have on campus, and they didn't have tortillas. I swear,
Oh,
you think
no.
about how trivial. But I said, oh no, I couldn't. And they don't
So the
allow
tortillas was a deal
the
breaker.
deal breaker. And we had animals, of course, and they don't allow animals, no. So we got in the car and we got on the 280. You know, I'm from Southern California because I call it the 280. Up
Right,
there, they
right.
call it 280. And we just started driving, and off the freeway, at some point, I saw a taco truck. So I told my husband, David, just pull over. I see a taco truck. We pulled over and off the freeway, and it happened to be in San Jose. And there was a garage that they were renting as an apartment behind a building for $400 a month that right next to the taco truck. And so that's why we lived in San Jose.
This is a great
I
story. I
had
love
no
it.
idea that East Palo Alto, if we hadn't taken the 280 and just turned left, 10 minutes down the street, we would have hit East Palo Alto. There would have been plenty of tortillas. I would have lived there. But we didn't even know it existed. So that's a true
It
story.
ended up in, but the fact that your radar was for tortillas and tacos, and that's where you were gonna live by,
You
is
know,
you knew that
you
that's
know what I realized? I felt so out of place at Stanford, truly, really, really out of place. I thought, well, my name is Avelar LaSalle because my husband's last name is LaSalle. Maybe they think I'm French. And that's why I was accepted. Like, this is a big old mistake. They're going to find me out. After school, I want to go home. I need to
Mm,
feel home.
mm.
So the little garage in our backyard was an alley, literally an alley. Um, but inside, you opened it, and David hooked it up with those big old speakers and big old fake tree plants and the lighting. And it was our little oasis, but I came home to home. It wasn't like other students that um, the school home is all one thing when you're in graduate school.
Yeah,
I definitely bifurcated my
yeah,
who I am with what I'm studying.
that's
That's the
fascinating.
only way I could do it.
Yeah, I had it when I was at Berkeley, and what we have in common too is that I went to Cal State
Ah,
for undergrad. I went to Cal State, Hayward, East Bay, and then same thing. I met my who would become my wife, Rebecca, and she was doing a master's at Berkeley when I met her, and I was finishing up my undergrad at Cal State, and I was like, "Hey, what's a master's?" And, she's gonna be a teacher too, sixth grade teacher. She's like, "This is more school. You just gotta write like a 30-page paper. It's just more school." She's like, "You should apply." I'm like, okay." And I applied to Berkeley because she was there, and I was just like, "Okay, I'll apply," and got accepted. But I get there and I had that same imposter syndrome, that feeling like, "Oh, man, I don't belong here. These people." And it was different for me than imposter syndrome. I was just annoyed at people. Like, it was just right. It's like, because they acted like they knew everything about us,
mm,
right? Like the people I was taking classes from had never had a lived experience in poverty, and yet they were the experts of children in poverty.
mm,
The professors, were experts of the inner city, and at the time, they used to call us the underclass, poor people, right? We were the underclass. That was their big term when I was there. And so the underclass, the lumpen proletariat, they kind of had this kind of fascination with, you know, um, Jack London. He wrote a book, Iron Heel. I don't know, 100 years ago, and in it, he wrote, about this working class guy that ends up at Berkeley at some dinner and talking to professors, and then he has a quote in there, and he goes to the professor, he goes, um, "You know nothing and less than nothing about the poor." He goes, "In fact, your sociology is very poor." And so I had that attitude, which, kind of unfair to the entire Berkeley establishment. But what I would do is I would leave to Oakland, to my home where I grew up, and I would just hang out in the community and apply what I was learning at Berkeley, but in the community, and that's how my first book was developed. Just to be trying to leave away from people that thought they were the experts of where I came from. Later on, I think I had a more balanced perspective of what the academy is about. I think it offers a lot, especially for those of us that come from different communities of struggle in terms of tools to make a difference in the world. And so just thinking about the way in which you've been able to develop such a great organization with Orenda, and I didn't even know that the meaning of the name, that's a beautiful meaning, um, to really collaborate at a very high level with leaders of entire school districts to say, hey, you know what? There's these various tools that we've developed over decades of research that will help with some of the most marginalized
Mhm.
populations. What is it like to show up? Because I know you have a lot of stories of success where you show up in an entire school or even an entire district and show data based on what you've done for them to uplift some of the most marginalized students in that school or district.
Mm. One of the very first projects we ever had when I've had all the jobs from instructional assistant, teacher, principal, district office, yeah, university professor. I ended up teaching at Cal State of Life for a time.
Wow.
Uh, but when I decided to defect from the system and live on the fringe, not the outside, but the fringe to apply positive pressure, um, the one of the very first projects we got was the Belmont cluster of LA Unified. So my own high school where I graduated, plus the feeder districts, and I thought, oh my goodness, like, in what world is it possible that I'm standing here telling all them what they should be doing? How is it that they're even listening to me? And then I thought about, oh, it's that Cal State LA professor. It's because no one ever says, oh, she has her master's from Cal State LA and was a teacher. She has her PhD from Stanford. That gives you this acceptability,
Mhm.
which is amazing and very unfair to Cal State LA, where I spent the majority of my years. But that aside, now after 28 years doing this, almost 29, we have, and I will never take credit for any of the projects, and I'll never take blame because in the end, it's on the adults who are there to implement and to improve upon and to own the systems. But to be able to share all the scholarship, the deep scholarship that does exist on how to address, how to release systemic inequity traps that really stem from, as you said, beliefs and expectations that are demographically based. The whole reason, the whole way the American education system originated has led us to this place. Every system's perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So we're getting the results of a system that's perfectly designed for these gaps. But to be able to share that and to enlighten people about what the history is that brought us to this place and what the research is that we have on solutions for reengineering a system uh, to ensure that every child receives the premium education that they deserve, no matter where they live, where they go to school, or what their circumstance. And then to see kids rise to that occasion is beyond rewarding. And even more than that, I'll tell you, is to see the transformation in the adults,
Mhm.
to see how reflection comes from the inside out when kids exceed the expectations that we have for them, whether we realize we had them or not, is profound. It's like, ugh, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I'm good.
Oh,
I
you've made
feel
a
good.
contribution. Mo. We're gonna hope that doesn't happen because we need you on this planet. But it is incredible, Dr. Robin Avelar LaSalle, just the incredible contributions you've made to transform education. And you said it, it's like in order to transform children's lives, we have to make sure we provide adults in the system the ability to transform themselves as well. And I think that's what you've been doing, supporting those educators in and creating that self-efficacy to continue to believe, hey, I can change any kid's life no matter where they come from, and I got to believe in them. And so it's been a wonderful time having you today. I appreciate you making the time. To my listeners, I know you've been inspired by Dr. Robin Avelar LaSalle's story, and again, sueños to success, sueños to Stanford, right? Accomplishing those things that you thought about when you were this little 3-year-old girl, telling kids, "Hey, I'm going to teach you," or whether it was your dad saying to you, "Hey, you know what? It's good, but I got higher expectations for you," or whether it's your teacher saying to you, Mr. Castro saying to you, "Hey, you know what? Um, People walked out so you could walk in," and then later your professor saying, "Hey, go to those big places because they'll give you some tools for you to then provide to the world to make it a better place." Thank you so much for your time. To my listeners, thank you for listening to Sueños to Success. Until next time, take care, everyone.